Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and I am joined by a special guest, my longtime friend, Stephen Dypiangco. Stephen, what's up, Stephen?
Hey, doing well. Nice to chat with you. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So for all y'all who don't know, which is most people that listen to this podcast, because I separate this from the rest of my life. Steve and I had a YouTube channel back in the day, like 10 years ago. Actually, 11 years ago, we started, called National Film Society. It's still awesome and it's still there. So if you want to watch it, I have enough distance from it from the early days to say like it's freaking awesome. So
It is.
Yeah. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to link to it like the old days. But most importantly, Steve is a longtime Clippers fan. And this is something when he and I started working together, the Warriors were still bad. And the Clippers, I believe, were getting a little bit better. They had Lob City happening. Is that true?
Yeah, Blake, Chris Paul, that era. We went to a Clippers playoff game where they got destroyed by the Spurs together. And so yeah, that era where it was like lots of promise, but still pretty far away from anything real.
Yeah. So, as our teams got good, it was like interesting because I was really looking forward to way back when. I mean, they played in the playoffs once, and the Clippers won in 2014 in the first round.
There was I think a couple of years where they played in the playoffs, and there was a time where it was like, whoa, there's this like heated rivalry. Right? Like the Warriors and the Clippers don't like each other. And then the Warriors just became champions and really good. And the Clippers never made that leap. And, the Warriors stopped, I think, like even bothering to think about the Clippers as a rival.
Yeah. I mean, the Clippers, they had their own interesting tale to tell over those, over the last decade and whatnot. But I just want to ask, because like I always respected longtime Clippers fans because there was nothing like, when did you become a Clippers fan, I guess, real quick? And then because they were bad. And then, there was the Quentin Richardson, Darius Miles era, Lamar Odom, Eric Piatkowski. So when did you become a fan and what has it been like?
Yeah. So my sort of start of my fandom began in the early 90s, sort of Danny Manning era, Olden Polynice, Gary Grant, Loy Vaught, Mark Jackson, let's see, Larry Brown coaching. Like Larry Brown, I remember getting them to the playoffs was such a big deal. So that was sort of where it began. I was living in Los Angeles. My brother and I collected athlete autographs, and so we would go get Clippers autographs and Lakers autographs, shoot around before practice. And so at that time I was more of a Lakers fan and just like a Clippers fan on the side. Where I sort of really started to switch my allegiance was that era of Darius Miles and Lamar Odom, and they were just so young and exciting to watch, so full of promise, that I really said, oh, wow, I'm really like paying attention to the Clippers now. And then when the Lakers had that season where they tried to buy a championship with Gary Payton and Karl Malone, I was like, all right, I'm done. Like I'm switching to the Clippers. And so that was like around 2004 and have been Clippers first and foremost ever since.
Do you actively dislike the Lakers or do you just lean more Clippers? Because it's interesting in LA, Lakers fans for a long time, they'll make fun of Clippers fans, especially in that 2020 bubble collapse fiasco. But then Clippers fans, do they actually really, are they pulling for the Lakers to lose? Are you happy about what you're seeing with your crosstown rivals?
Yeah, so it's for me, it's evolved. So I think back in, let's say, I can't remember, it was 2009, 2010, like where the Lakers beat the Celtics. And I was rooting for the Lakers. I was wanting them to succeed. So I didn't necessarily have anything against the Lakers. I think as the Clippers have become way more relevant, and they've really just kind of owned the Lakers over the past few years, then to me it's been interesting the backlash that Lakers fans have towards Clippers fans and
Mhm.
really hating on Clippers fans. And for as a longtime Clippers fan, it's like, oh, like why are you even bothering to care about, like you shouldn't care about the Clippers. The Clippers shouldn't even be on your radar. It just shows how bad you are right now. And so the fact that Lakers fans are even paying attention or bothered by Clippers fans, to me just shows like that, like, yeah, just the state of the Clippers are so much more promising, so much better than where Lakers fans are today, especially this season. They're horrible.
Yeah. So when you pop open ESPN.com and you see like a box score and you see that the Lakers played, are you more pulling, like, is your inner monologue or just instinct leaning more towards, I hope they lost or I hope they won?
I think that like it's like it's more the inner monologue is like, oh, how much did the Lakers lose by this time? Just anticipating that they will lose,
Yeah.
and it's just such a train wreck over there. It's like it's so early in the season too. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's like no way they're going to turn this thing around. Like it seems like it's so far off the rails that
Yeah.
like it's just
Yeah.
going to be a long, long season for them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm enjoying it. Um, so let's talk about the Clippers, man, because I spend so much time watching the Warriors and doing this show about the Warriors that I don't get a chance to really keep up with other teams. And it's funny because a season ago, when the Warriors were off to their 18-2 start, I was keeping my eye on the Suns because they were right up
Mm-hmm.
there. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, the Suns ended up with the best record in the West. But right now, it's just I don't even know. I had to take a peek at the standings to see who was in the
Yeah.
top six,
Right.
and your Clippers started off slow, but like they're what, like 10-6, 10-7 now. So what is the deal with them? Are they? They were supposed to be. A lot of people pick them as the top seed coming out of the West. How are they looking right now?
Yeah, I think again, it's like it's very early in the season, so I think that they're definitely have a lot to continue to work through the adjustment to at first the first couple of games Kawhi back and he was coming off the bench and then he had knee issues with with the knee that he's had problems with, so he was out for a while and then they had to adjust to that and they were losing. They lost like two in a row to OKC, who was like at that point had like one win. They're
Mm-hmm.
having like super close games with the Rockets. And so I think it's very much adjusting to the new rotation, having like John Wall back, or sorry, starting, like as part of this new team, and he brings a whole different energy. He's just like attacking. And even somebody like Norman Powell, who was on the team last year, but was largely out due to injury once the Clippers traded for him. And so you have all these sort of additions. They're figuring out like who's doing what. And I think the turning point happened a few weeks ago where basically Paul George was like, all right, like Kawhi's out, I'm just taking over. And then like 1 week he had a huge week. He was like, I believe like Western Conference Player of the Week. He was averaging like close to 30. And so he just said like, all right, like I'm just going to like will us to victory
Mm-hmm.
and be that like, alpha on the team. And that helped sort of turn things around and start to get them back to 500 and then creeping up above 500. And they went and they beat the Cavs, who at that time I think only had like 2 losses or something like that. And then, so they're on the right trajectory. I think things are looking good in terms of where they're at in the season and their title aspirations for the end of the season.
How does Kawhi look to you? Because I actually haven't seen him play this season. I just saw photos about him like putting on. Did he put on some weight, or is he fat, or is he just like more muscular, or is he just out of shape?
No, he's super muscular. So you can tell like the whole time he's been out, he's just been hitting the gym. And I've only seen him play a bit at the beginning of the season. The I think the Lakers game, the first game there, and you see, I think basically these flashes of like, oh man, this guy can just score at will. Like he just
Mm-hmm.
goes, he's like his mid range is like just unstoppable. And you see that, but he's definitely still like working his way up to that. So that's not every possession. That's like maybe 1 out of 5 possessions, right? So he's still finding his way back. His shot seems like isn't really there, his long range shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's a bit of like just like hesitancy to like really go all out, right? And
Yeah,
and to,
yeah.
and to, and to me, it's like, okay, again, it's so early. It's a long season. Like build your way back. I mean, he made some comment after the first couple of games about like, oh yeah, coming back from an ACL is like a 2-year process.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, try to, I think, set expectations that way. Like, hey, like, don't expect me to be like Superman right out of the gate. And if we go back to his season with Toronto, right, where they won, it was like he was on load management, right? He was barely playing, and then like boom, come the playoffs, it's like, all right, that's when you need him. And so obviously it's a long season. They still are figuring out how these pieces work together, but it's all about being in a good spot by the end of the year.
Yeah, yeah. Is the prognosis that he'll be like, back to who he was eventually? Like it's an ACL, which obviously nowadays you can come back from. But is he, kind of on track? Like what people expect from an
I don't think
ACL?
so. No, I think people are like, oh shit, he's gonna come back and he'll just like kill it and he'll be, 25 points a night. And so I think there is some like, oh wow,
Yeah,
like yeah,
yeah.
he isn't there, right? And he's still also right, like restricted on minutes. And so very much like, okay, if he stays at this level, like that's a potentially a problem. If
Hmm.
he's putting up like 23 minutes, 8 points a game, few rebounds, right? Like few assists, that's serviceable. That's not like the guy you signed to the max contract.
Right.
And so really what you hope is that like, okay, I mean, as a Clippers fan is like, okay, this is just like natural. It's gonna, lots of rust. It'll
Hmm.
take time. And then, we'll see where we're at later in the year.
Yeah. How's John Wall looked? I mean, that dude didn't play for
Yeah.
a couple years, 3 years. I forgot. It's been ages.
Right.
And I thought that was a good pickup. How does he look? I almost wish the Warriors had somebody like that, considering their bench is so young right now. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, what's your take on John Wall?
Yeah. So he again brings this like tons of energy, that attacking the paint. Uh, and that's something that's very, I would say, a good change of pace for the Clippers because, and like right now he's coming off the bench and he's
Mhm.
even sitting on like back to backs. And so they're also just trying to build him back up as well after having taken so much time off. And so with him, I think that like watching some of the early games, it was like, whoa, he's driving past like everybody. And even his own teammates are like, don't know what to do because they're not used to playing with somebody like that.
Right.
And so his style, his speed is an adjustment. It's something that I would say is very welcome. And as somebody coming off the bench, is like the right type of energy, something that, that you want to like really move the offense, keep things going. And
Mhm.
so I would say, considering that they didn't have to pay a lot or give up anything to get him, really good addition. What we're seeing lately is like Reggie Jackson, who's starting, is putting up some points, uh, putting up over 20 points the last few games. And like, that's what you need. And that's what you, as a fan, as a Clippers fan, it was like, oh, what's going to happen? Right? Are they going to like split their time? And it's like, oh no, it's great if like Reggie can be, because last year with everybody out, he had to carry the team and he scored a bunch, and not with a good percentage, but like, hey, he was like who kind of like was the foundation of their offense in many ways. And so him not taking a step back, but still being a reliable, producer points wise, then gives you, like, yeah, there's not a ton of pressure on John Wall to come in and put up like 10, 14 points, few assists. You've got a, pretty well-rounded, backcourt at that point.
How does he look compared to how he looked before, percentage wise, or what are people saying? Does he look like his speed, his hops, his athleticism is like 90%, 80%, half of what he was before? Like what's the word on the street?
He's definitely lost the step, right? Like he's
Yeah.
just older, he's time off. So he isn't, my guess is it's probably in like the 20% range off of, where he was in his heyday. But it's still, though, like very aggressive, which is, you don't have to be necessarily the fastest guy on the court to I think he still has that belief, and he's making like crazy passes and like doing, crazy layups and stuff like that. That's like, oh, that's just a different mindset of like how you play the game and how you attack the basket.
Right. It's interesting because like obviously similar to maybe a Klay Thompson who's coming off a couple of catastrophic injuries. And it's definitely, hearing you talk about Kawhi and John Wall, it's obviously something similar to what Warriors fans are experiencing with Klay, and just, leaving room for patience. I think the Warriors start has been so bad. There's been a lot more hand wringing and at least Twitter shouting for change. But do you get the sense that John Wall has like accepted where he's at? I'm sure it's easier to come to a new team and be like, okay, I'm just going to try to fit in instead of, having his own team and trying to be who he was, which for a while it seemed like Klay Thompson was struggling with. And I feel like he's found his groove. But is Wall like, I'm going to do the things, but I'm not going to try to be Eastern Conference All-Star John Wall?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was going into the season. He has very much taken that approach of being, hey, team first here. I don't have to be front and center on this squad. I can do whatever I can do to help us win. And yeah, you're seeing that for sure with him, again, just like coming off the bench and producing that way. And that's, again, like thinking about that ultimate goal of winning a championship, right? It's like you need role players. You can't have everybody as the star. You need, right. But then you also need a few, a handful of guys that can go for 25 when you need it, when your star is hurt or your whatever is in foul trouble or issues, right? And so I think that's what's exciting, because you have Wall who can do that, Reggie Jackson who can do that. You have Powell who can do that to a certain extent. Morris can come up with 20 sometimes. And so there's a few different, that's the big, sort of opportunity that the Clippers have, right? Is that they have such depth. The key, though, is staying healthy and then making sure that they have enough time to figure out how to play well together, over the course of the season, so that it isn't like starting from scratch come the postseason.
The NBA season is heating up, and there are still so many unknowns. Like, will James Wiseman actually be on this Warriors team by the end of the season? I hope so. When I'm looking to get in on the action, I bet with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers can bet just $5 pregame moneyline on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Check this out. Right now, everyone can earn up to a 100% boost with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place a same game parlay, and combine multiple bets like which team will win, total rebounds, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. The app is super easy to use. Just pop it open, do what you got to do, and you're good to go. Download the app now, sign up with code TBPN, place a $5 pregame moneyline bet on any NBA team to win their game, and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's code TBPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Do you trust Paul George? I mean, what's your opinion of him? Did that 2020 hitting the side of the backboard playoff piece stuff, did that ding your opinion of what Paul George can do, who he is as a player? Do you think that was just a fluke and you're like a big Paul George fan?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that certainly there's a reason that he built that reputation, right? That negative reputation is sort of choking in the playoffs. And so it's hard to shed that. But what he did when a couple years ago when Kawhi went down and he really stepped up and got them into the Western Conference Finals. And so to me, it's like, I can't think of in many ways like a better Clippers player. So like in the sense of like, hey, who are the Clippers? The Clippers are like losers. They're underdogs. They're like, nobody expects them to do anything. Right. And it's like, oh, cool. If you're like Paul George, it's like, oh, that's like kind of like you, right? Like nobody respects you. Nobody thinks you're like that good. Mm-hmm. And then you're out to like prove everybody wrong. And that's, to me, that embodies like the Clippers spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How does he look in terms of health, his shoulder and all that stuff?
Yeah. So he's out right now. And, you know, I'm not sure what the extent is of this latest injury. I think it's probably pretty mild. My sense is like, oh man, I'm not taking it for granted at all that these guys are going to be healthy, you know, like very long. It's like really, I think this is something like year 4 or something of the Paul George, Kawhi experiment. They haven't been both healthy, right? Like if anything, it's been nothing but inconsistent, right, over the past several years. So I just, again, like hopeful that they can click, stay healthy, and, you know, be in a good spot. And we've seen, right, with in the past where, you know, obviously with the Warriors, but other teams where it's just like health down the stretch is everything.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the Warriors dynasty run, every win or loss in the finals can be pointed to health for them, right? The even Cavs fans will argue that if Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love in the first one, and then the Warriors had a bunch of nagging injuries in the 2016 one, and then of course you go to, I think, both Klay and KD being out against the Raptors. If they're healthy, that series goes 5 for the Warriors, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that interesting because Paul George was one of when he was on the Pacers, I really liked him, right? Because he was this guy. I remember him getting drafted. Yeah, I love seeing guys who have 2 first names. And and I was like, this is Paul George, dude. And I didn't realize he would be so good for the Pacers, right? He was in the MVP race that year that they were coming after the Heat. And he was like the first guy that I recall who could actually play LeBron kind of straight up. And then obviously the leg injury, but then he's had this funky arc, right? Because all of a sudden he became kind of a supporting character with OKC and Russ,
Right. Right.
and then coming to the Clippers, being that second banana in theory to Kawhi. But how long do you think their window is open? Because it's 4 years. That first year was obviously their best chance because they were like right there with a 3-1 lead. And then injuries have been the second and third seasons.
Sure.
What are you feeling is their window at this point?
Yeah, it's not more, to me, it's not more than next year at most. It's like it's this year, maybe next year, like that's it. Now, that being said, it's like, well, you have the richest owner in like North American sports, right? So they're right building this new arena and all of this stuff. So like the long-term future is bright in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
but given this sort of current formation of this team, this is it. It's like it's all been building up to this. It's like it's got to work now.
If the Clippers were able to snag like one title in this window, obviously the narrative changes, but also the vibe might change around LA a little bit, right? You're always going to have the 17 banners, Lakers fans. Like when you argue with a Lakers fan, ultimately it just comes down to like 17 banners or whatever number they have. I forgot.
Yeah.
But there's a chance the Clippers could snag some Gen Z fans if the Lakers are down and they snag one, and then there's like this new arena and Steve Ballmer keeps spending. It could change their near future.
Yeah, I think that there's tons of like diehard Lakers fans. I think the way that the Clippers have positioned themselves in Los Angeles through their billboards, through their advertising, it's about the alternative to the Lakers. It's not about like glamour and like Showtime, right? It's about like that gritty, like working class, type of brand. And so to me, that like that resonates, and I really appreciate that. And I think there's other people out there who feel the same way. LA is a big market, lots of people there, and so and obviously, as we mentioned, the Lakers aren't doing themselves any favors with how they're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let me ask you, what makes Ty Lue such a good coach? Because I was down on Ty Lue, obviously, in 2016. I was like, oh, he just took over a team that David Blatt brought along and, did some, and he got lucky, right? But then I actually really like Ty Lue now. I think he's one of the top 5 coaches in the league. I think that him taking over for Doc Rivers, I think Doc Rivers is overrated. I think he's a great motivator, a great communicator, can relate to the players.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's a great coach overall.
Yeah.
But I think Ty Lue, I think that's actually one of the biggest X factors, because I look at the Clippers and Ty Lue, I think, is someone that, as a Warriors fan, not necessarily scares me, but I'm like, okay, he has something. And then I look at Kawhi, of course, he has something. No coincidence that both these dudes beat the Warriors in the finals. But what do you think makes Ty Lue such a good coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes down to certainly is that end of game management, being that tactician, understanding how to make those right chess moves at the end of the game when everything's on the line. Mm-hmm. And that's just a totally different situation than with Doc Rivers, where it was just like, oh man, they're gonna blow it. Like, I just know it. And certainly like there was other times where it was like, well, if they don't blow it, it's because Chris Paul just willed them again to victory. Like, he just is making the incredible shots and making everything happen that needed to happen to win. And so it was like they won in those situations in spite of Doc Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And so with me, it's like, oh, not only does Ty Lue have that ability to really impact the game to help them win, but then it's also, I think he has that buy-in from the team where they trust him and they're like, okay, we can do this in a way that, like, yeah, with Doc Rivers, it was just like, oh man, and here we go again. Like, and to me, I'm like, oh, and then now the Sixers fans like understand it, like, and it's like, yep, you could take it. We don't want him. It's like, look now, you're still no closer to a championship than you were before.
Yeah, I don't see the Sixers ever winning a title in this in the next 5 years or anything like that. I mean, a lot can change, so I'll say in the next 2 years or whatever. Especially now that they signed James Harden for a while. What's your prediction for this Clippers Warriors game? It's in San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah. I mean, I think the Clippers are on a good streak right now. They just beat the Jazz, who are, right, like, everybody's surprised that they're top of the West instead of at the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm liking the Clippers. I think the Clippers have a good chance to come up on top here, while I think the Warriors are still like kind of back and forth, haven't yet found their groove. Mm-hmm. And so, not that the Clippers are like riding super hot, but it's just like, hey, here's this is a winnable game for them.
Yeah, and it's crazy because a month ago, I mean, I guess it still would have been a decent battle, but I would have been like, oh, if Paul George is out and Kawhi's going to play?
I think so, because I think they played. If it's a back-to-back, I can't remember if they played.
It's not a back-to-back.
Okay, then he should play, I think.
Okay, but Paul George is out?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I'll take the Warriors. it's a Warriors show, and they rested the starters and the vets against the Pelicans, so they have an extra day and whatnot. Let me ask you one last thing. Who is your favorite Clippers player of all time?
Back in the early 90s, when my brother and I would get autographs, Loy Vaught was just like a very, kind of unsung hero, like doing, getting the boards, getting points, but just doing all that stuff that you needed to kind of push the team forward. And my brother has like a pair of Loy Vaught like shoes, like Loy Vaught gave him some shoes autographed and stuff like that.
Wow.
So Loy Vaught, it holds a special place in my heart among all, sort of Clippers. So he's number one.
Yeah, I was a Loy Vaught fan, at Michigan. I thought he was. I mean, if he played now, he'd be very, very solid, and he'd probably learn how to shoot a 3-point shot. Yeah, you talk about autographs. I remember one time when I was a kid, my friends and I, it was my friend's birthday, so we went to a Warriors Kings game, and this is when the Kings had those powder blue uniforms still, and we split up in groups and we found each other, and then it was so late that the players were coming out of the tunnel, yeah, and we were outside. They were going to their cars. The Kings were getting on their bus. Danny Ainge was the nicest guy like I'd ever met, and I grew up hating Danny Ainge. And right now, like I'm old, so I don't really hate anybody in the NBA, but I will never forget that he was signing autographs for us. Like there were like 12 of us, and he was really nice, really gracious, and very, very cool dude. So my opinion of Danny Ainge changed on the spot. I'm not a Danny Ainge fan, but when I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, not so bad. Not so bad.
Well, I mean, and he's the mastermind behind this Jazz, right? Like them dumping Mitchell and Markkanen, or getting Markkanen, and like doing all this stuff. And it's
getting rid of Gobert. Yeah.
Getting rid of Gobert. Like, and the Wolves are terrible right now. Gobert, I have him on my fantasy team. He scored like no field goals or something like the other game. It's just like a mess.
Yeah.
And that's like only making those draft picks that the Jazz got like more valuable.
Yeah.
Wild.
It's like, oh, they should have just traded for Mitchell instead, right? Instead of Gobert.
Yeah.
Because I thought the Wolves would be good. I think a lot of people did. And looking at them and kind of hearing what the problem is, like, the lane is so crowded. Anthony Edwards hasn't taken the leap. He doesn't have as many driving lanes. And I always said that losing Pat Beverly was going to be huge to them because he was the one person last season that brought some fire to their team. And of course, I'm very, very down on D'Angelo Russell. I think he is completely, I mean, at this point, I think he's perfectly rated because I thought he was overrated for so long.
Sure.
He's only a max player because the Warriors needed to get him for KD. So they had to pay him whatever his max was. He's not a max player. He was an all-star kind of on a technicality, right? An injury replacement in the East, which was still weaker back then. And he's just not he's not a winning player, plain and simple. So he's not somebody that's going to lead the team. So they have no leaders. It's not Anthony Edwards yet. It's not Karl-Anthony Towns as much as he tries to do it. Definitely not Gobert. It's not D'Angelo Russell. So what are you left with? I haven't really tuned in to, sometimes I would listen to the Timberwolves podcasts or read some of their local papers because the Warriors were tied to their draft pick for so long, the Jonathan Kuminga pick, but I haven't in a while. So I'm curious to hear some of the hand wringing and doom and gloom. Like, are they really freaking out because they gave up their future as well for now? And Gobert's in his early 30s and Edwards is in his early 20s. So like, how is that all going to suss out? But yeah, Danny Ainge, did the Celtics, did the Jazz, and he's an excellent exec and a nice guy from my childhood. But the thing about the Clippers is they have Jerry West, who, in my opinion, is the greatest Laker of all time because not only on the court, but he built some of those teams. Everywhere he's gone, everything he touches turns to gold. The Grizzlies got decent. The Warriors obviously became what they are, and he's helped transform the Clippers. They've just had, bad luck and bad bubble execution.
There it is.
All right, man. Well, no, thank you for coming onto the show. That was a lot of fun. I don't think we've ever talked so in depth about basketball or the Clippers. Where can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Stephen Dypiangco.
And by the way, Steve has his own podcast called Metaverse Brands. And Steve, so, we work together. Steve is now in the metaverse. Like this, he's not real anymore. He's totally just in the future. So tune in to his podcast if you're interested in the metaverse, what it is, what's happening. So please do tune in to that.
Thanks.
All right, man. Well, that is another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Patrick E. Pino or at Oakland Warriors. Check out our YouTube channel where you can watch this episode, youtube.com/Oakland Warriors. Check us out at oaklandwarriors.com and be sure to tell your fellow Warrior fan friends to tune in and listen. The Oakland Warriors podcast is produced by National Film Society and is a part of the Basketball Podcast Network. And if you're so inclined, please do leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you want to leave us a nice review saying good stuff about the show on Apple Podcasts, that would be hugely, hugely appreciated, and it would be very, very helpful. Thanks. That's it.
Music in this episode provided by Paper Sun. Special thanks to Paul Amardo for production support. See you next time, and go Dubs.